Frank Spinelli is a talented photographer, author, traveler, and collector of extraordinary stories. Today we'll learn about his curiosity, intellect, and incredible sense of beauty and design. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a comment and a like, and check out some of the other episodes on my channel. And now, today's episode of Allan Gorman's 15 Minutes of Fame Art TV show.
My 15 minutes of fame, I want it, my 15 minutes of fame, I want it, my 15 minutes of fame.
I met today's guest back in the 1970s. In his recollection, it was in a restaurant, and we struck up a conversation. I was a young art director at Young and Rubicam, and Frank was a tabletop photographer, and we worked together a few times, and we just had a natural affinity for each other. So, hi, Frank.
Hey, Allan.
How you doing?
Better and better.
So, I know you grew up in Woodstock before Woodstock was Woodstock. And it's in the Hudson Valley in upstate New York. And could you tell us a little about, your family? I assume you're pretty much the same age I am. So it was 1950s and Leave It to Beaver time. And let's get a little background on Frank Spinelli.
So Frank grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
Kidding.
Nope, he grew up in East New York. He was the eldest of what turned out to be 5 kids.
Are you talking about you, or are you talking about you? Okay.
I was the eldest of 5 kids. I grew up in East New York in a housing project where we basically, the only thing that we had on our walls was a calendar. But what we did have was a connection to upstate New York. My father's father had an apple orchard outside of Kingston, New York. And slowly his 5 brothers and 1 sister, a few of them migrated up there, married local people. And the natural progression of that was my father deciding that he couldn't raise all the kids. There were 4 of us at the time in Brooklyn. So he moved up to a place called Woodstock, New York in 1963. I was 15 years old. And
So you didn't grow up there. You're a Brooklyn boy like me.
Exactly.
All right.
I'm a borough kid.
Borough kid.
But that said, I was a bookworm, really, growing up in Brooklyn. I mean, I read and read and read, and that's all I did. I read all the classics, Moby Dick, Hawthorne. I just couldn't stop reading. By the time I got to Woodstock, no pun intended, I hooked up.
You were 500,000 strong. Okay.
I hooked up with, mostly my friends were the sons and daughters of artists. And for me, for whatever reason, they were the people that I decided to hang out with, rather than the people that, there was another element to Woodstock. And these are the kids that would go around, drink beer and shoot signs with a shotgun at night, and maybe poach a deer once in a while. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't my cup of tea. I hung out with these kids that were, groomed in the households of artists. And I think that's how I got infected.
They were the artsy fartsy crowd.
They were the artsy fartsy crowd.
The geeks, those people.
They thought out of the box. Yeah. But that said, I got my first camera while I was in the housing project. I won it in a raffle. Back then we used to go to a matinee on a Saturday, and they'd give you a card, and then you'd have all these shows, and at the end they would raffle something off.
You get three movies, 47 cartoons, and what they call the cereal,
Right.
right? And then they give you whatever the prize was if you were the winner of the cereal, right?
Right. The first and only thing I ever won.
What kind of camera? Brownie?
It was a little brownie. It was magic. It was a magic box. Number one, it could stop motion, which flipped me out.
Mhm.
I'll never forget it. I mean, I was always played ball, and to see that ball stopped in midair when I had a print made, of course, I didn't take a lot of pictures because I couldn't afford it, even though I was entrepreneurial and made money doing a lot of different things. For some reason, I never continued taking pictures until I got to Woodstock.
Always did a lot of different things. What'd you do?
So one of the things that I did was, the big money maker for me was coins. So I would go to the bank and I would drive every banker within the region crazy, because I would buy pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. And I would go through them and I would go in for their numismatic value. And I had a source at a candy store. A guy was a collector, and I would sell him rare coins that I would find in these rolls. And I made money doing that. And then there were fireworks, there were pigeons. I mean, you name it, I did it.
A businessman, okay.
I was a businessman for sure. So, by the time I got to Woodstock, I sort of like had a background, even though it wasn't part of my family's background. And I segued into, photography in high school. I loved the darkroom. Again, it was magic. I couldn't believe. I mean, some of the things that I like to do are just like really off the wall, like washing windows and vacuuming floors, because you have instant gratification. But with a photograph, with a camera, you could see this object, and it was an artifact, and it just.
So you're a conduit. You did that, so that came from you, so. I mean, when you vacuum the floor, yeah, you're vacuuming the floor, but it's the fun of watching the dirt getting sucked up and getting
Right,
clean.
and the transformation.
Right, but making a photograph, well, it's magic, actually. Darkroom is magic. I would go in the darkroom and would come out for 9 hours.
Exactly, you know what I'm talking about.
I would like your eyes crossed and you have fumes.
Yeah, so I get to Woodstock and I have these friends, and they read a lot of the same books that I read, and we were talking about things that were philosophical things, and of course there were girls, and the girls were like, they're not teasing their hair was straight, and they weren't snapping gum. It was a completely different environment. And I loved it. And I took photography in school. And I didn't really get into photography until a girlfriend bought me a Nikon camera after just my last year of college. And I started taking pictures, and I studied literature and American history. And my plan was to become a writer, but I wound up really liking the camera, and I realized that I had intuitively realized, I couldn't name it, but I knew that I had a natural eye. I walked around designing, framing things, and I knew the S curve that led here. I just had an innate sense of design. And so the pictures, even though, the subjects weren't always the best, they always had something compelling about them.
Well, when I knew you, when I met you, you were doing tabletop stuff, and you impressed me with your sense of design. I mean, you would take objects and play around with them and try to find abstract ideas.
The other thing that I think that I had, and I learned later after looking at my own work, and you know what it's like. You make something, and after a while, you realize what it is that you make. It doesn't necessarily come to you right away. And at one point in my career, I realized that I was a surrealist, and my sense of reality was surrealistic. And that was pretty interesting for me. And really, the first big job that I had was.
That's why we became friends, because
You
it was
too.
a surreal experience, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Couldn't resist.
My first job, my first breakthrough job was a cover on New York Magazine. And the way that happened was, I was called, I got a call from this guy who wanted to be who came to look at my work, wanted to be my rep, said he was an older guy. He spoke like a jazz musician. Hey, Frank, yeah, man, let me take your portfolio. Bebop, man, I can get this. I can give you if I get you a job, can I be your agent? Man, I can do this stuff. I'll be back here this afternoon. Let me take your portfolio, that kind of guy. And he comes back that afternoon and says, it turned out that everybody hated this guy. They didn't want him in their office, so they gave him a job to get him out of the office. But he comes back with a page in New York Magazine, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. So I did a variation of what J.C. Suarez wanted, who was the design director, and it was really surrealistic. And I'm literally shooting a job with sex aids for a sex aid catalog. And I literally have a dildo in one hand. And my assistant says, there's a phone call and it's my agent. And I have the phone in one hand and a dildo in the other. And the agent saying, hey man, you're not going to believe this. You're going to be famous. You're going to get the cover. They put your picture, that white picture, with the drops and this and that. They put that on the cover. Just like that. And it became, I never stopped working really after that. It's very cool.
Very cool. So that's when I met you, when you had your studio or
Right.
studios.
You did something really great for me.
What'd I do?
I don't even think you remember. You designed my logo.
Ah, okay.
And to this day,
Was it a good logo? Or?
Fantastic. People
Really?
still comment it to this day. It's the Spinelli in capital letters with a period. The type was magnificent.
Huh?
Statement was amazing. To make that period with my lyrical name, it was really inspirational.
Glad to be of service.
It was my pleasure.
Need another one, but
Okay. That one's going to last my lifetime.
Oh, good. Okay, maybe you should design mine, because yeah. What made you move to New York from upstate? Why'd you come back to the city?
Well, I grew up really poor, and there was no real outlet for me to succeed in Woodstock. I couldn't be a photographer. And when I got the camera, I decided, after I graduated college, I put myself through college. There was nothing for me up here. I had no, girlfriends. I had very good friends, but they all stayed up here. They became carpenters, and they did whatever they did.
Country guys, what country guys do?
Yeah. They were still, very interesting people, because they inherited the curiosity from their family, but they didn't have, I needed to go to the city and find myself and make money. And that's what I did. And I worked as a photo assistant. The first job, I put an ad in the paper. I went to an agent. Nothing happened. I went to a place. I tried to find a place around Columbus Circle and a little bit west of that, to apply for a job as a cab driver. And I couldn't find the place. And I
You're
just,
lucky. I drove a cab one day and I had it. I said,
Right.
"Okay, this sucks."
and I was living, I was married. I got married to Andrea. It was my first wife. And I couldn't find the place, and I felt really, really bad because it got dark and it got cold. And I just said, screw this. And I went back to the apartment, and I'll never forget walking up the 5 stories to the top floor. And she had buzzed me in, and she's waiting on the top of the stairs. And she said, "You got a job in a photo studio. You're the 4th assistant."
Who are you working for?
A catalog photographer named Don Marks.
Oh, okay.
No one, but there was a guy there that I became his assistant, who was this guy named Alan Sussman, who they called Doc. And Alan was great. He took me under his wing, and he took me out to lunch, and he would say, "When you have a light meter and you put it on something, is it reading black or white or in between?" You know, things like that. He would make me think about photography. And it also turned out that I happened to be like an extraordinarily good black and white printmaker right off the bat. So the 2 guys started using me, and they stuck me in the dark room. And, you know, I rearranged the dark room. They didn't like that, but they realized that it was right. It turned out that it was on 23rd Street. His studio was on 23rd Street, 115 East 23rd Street. And it was also the 9th floor. And one day I'm riding up in the elevator, and it opens on the 4th floor. And it's Charles Atlas's warehouse, where he had all his stuff. Well, Charles Atlas was a relative.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. My father's brother had married his daughter.
My 2 brothers did Charles Atlas stuff when
Dynamic tension.
Oh, wow, whatever the hell it was, I don't know. That didn't last very long, but
So that's where I basically started. And, you know, I had a career for a long time.
and then when you leave, what made you leave?
It was basically after 9/11, I was done with photography, and I was there basically for my daughter. I co-raised her with my ex-wife, who lived in the same street. And I had done a very smart thing and bought a building with a partner on 26th Street, because I was tired of paying rent at one point. And everyone thought it was a gigantic mistake, but you can imagine now it's like Donald Trump. You buy a little postcard of dirt in Manhattan and you're a millionaire. It's like really weird.
When we met, you met me, I was living in loft on 17th Street and 5th Avenue. I was renting, but you could buy a floor, a 5,000 square foot floor for $25,000.
Right.
Would buy them, and they put another 25,000 in it, and $50,000. I had a palace.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the couple who did mine, you know, cut off 1,000 square feet and pay their mortgage, you know. So it was great, but it was well, you knew the neighborhood because you were there, but it was photography land and garbage trucks at 3 o'clock in the morning. And,
A little rough, to put it mildly.
well, it was kind of film noir. It was kind of nice. I liked it. There's something mysterious and cool about that. I had a straight shot to the Empire State Building. So
I remember that.
yeah, I would lie in my bed, and on a stormy night, the clouds would steam, you know, and you'd see this, you know, roiling sky. And then at midnight, they would go off, and it was almost like you could hear it go, you know, it was just so powerful. It was just a great image. But that was an interesting time back then. And then the advertising agencies discovered that neighborhood, and all of a sudden, Chelsea got hot. Yeah.
So when my daughter went to college, I packed up and left. And I came up to my house here, but I've had,
So when was it? Around what time?
that was 2006.
One of the highlights of my life was you and I going up Rio together.
We went to the carnival.
We went to Carnival, right? And it was mind blowing. Every corner you turn around, it was a silent. But basically you always had that. I don't know if you were doing that before that trip.
So I had the wanderlust from early on, and I had no fear about traveling. And I'm a dual citizen now. I don't know if I told you that, Alan. No, of Europe, because of my grandfather's Italian.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I know when the last administration, a lot of people kind of traced their roots and said, let me get it. We had a friend who got his German dual citizenship. Somebody else I know, Portuguese dual citizenship, waiting, so they were ready.
Well, there was that, but also my daughter went to school in Scotland. So I basically got it for her. It turned out she never really used it. So I wound up paying the tuition. But it was really that, and, giving her another dimension. She's also got the same wanderlust as I do.
Well, good for her. Yeah. You said she went to school, she graduated School of Visual Arts.
Well, first she's graduated at the University of Edinburgh, and then she got her MFA at the
How
school.
cool is that?
Yeah.
But tell us about your connection to the Caribbean and Cuba. And
I went to Jamaica in 1986.
okay.
And I was at a hotel, and I met this guy, and he saw my camera, and he said, I'm a photographer. And I said, well, so am I. He goes, do you do this for a living? And I said, yeah. He goes, what's your name? And I told him, and he says, I know you. I know your name, because I had advertised in the Black Book.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
And he was a photographer, formally trained at RISD. And we hit it off. And that was the beginning of my relationship with Jamaica. And I stayed with him, and we became fast friends. He would come to New York, stay with me. I would go to Jamaica for a week or two in the winter and stay with him.
Was he Jamaican?
Yeah, he's Jamaican. He's a white Jamaican.
Yeah.
His family goes back to 1780 in Jamaica.
Oh, geez. Okay.
So that was my connection. And the first time I went to Cuba was in 99. Went from Jamaica. Another friend, Jamaican, who had a tourist boat business, wanted to go to Cuba and see about opening a business there. And that was the first time I went to Cuba. And I also read a lot of history. The experiment there was very interesting to me. And they had just opened Cuba up because the wall fell in, I think, 89 or recently.
The Berlin Wall.
Yeah. And after that, shortly after that, about 4 years after that, Cuba stopped subsidizing. Russia stopped subsidizing Cuba. And
So
there
they-
was a period in Cuba where people were literally eating at their pets. That's how bad it got. And that's when Castro decided to partially open the economy with a business that allowed people to rent out part of their homes. So we were able to, and have little restaurants in their homes. So that's how we got to Cuba, because we could actually stay in a place that wasn't a government place. We could stay in homes, and then
Get to know the people.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I speak Spanish,
Yeah.
so yeah, and it was natural for me to go back when I bought my own place in Jamaica in 2015. So I started going in 2015. I made 3 trips. I was supposed to go before COVID for my last trip, because I'm actually putting a book together about Cuba. You know, I'm a compulsive picture taker. I just walk the streets for 7 or 8 hours, and that's what I do.
I know, they're amazing. Yeah, and also Burning Man, which is that's explain to people who don't know what the Burning Man is and what you did.
So Burning Man was in 2014. The first time I went was 2014. I went because my nephew told me that I'd like it. I had my nephew, Stephen. So I said, heck, I'm going to go. So I drove across the country with my pickup truck, and I parked next to these 2 guys, serendipitously, 2 great guys that I'm still friends with, 2 gay guys. And they basically took care of me, because, you know, you're in an environment that's like totally inhospitable. And it was fantastic. So I slept in a tent for 7 days and rode around on a bicycle, because you don't really drive in Burning Man.
And
And
you got one, a Mad Max van or something like that.
right, they're called mutant vehicles,
Mutant vehicle.
literally. And and it's this area that's about 8 square miles that's just peppered with art installations, and it's fantastic. And Allan, when the first time and many times later, you go out after it gets dark on your bicycle, and you just all of a sudden look around you, and you become completely outside of yourself with joy, because you're seeing a spectacle of lights and humanity being so creative. You just cannot believe this is your species. It's just like, it gives me chills to just think about it now. The invention and the warmth that people show you, because there's no money exchanged hands there. And people, they just give. I didn't even I brought all this stuff. I didn't even have to cook anything. I mean, literally, it just, people, you just stopped and people would say, come and have something. And it wasn't just like, you know, pork and beans. These were like
gourmet meal, right?
yeah, in the middle of nowhere. There's no infrastructure, there's no electric, there are no trees, there's nothing. And a city, the 2nd largest city in Nevada, just opens up in a week. It's just phenomenal.
You have to give something back, so your contribution was booked, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I had a press pass. So, and I mean, what's better for a photographer than an exhibitionist? Hello. So you're just taking pictures and, you know, getting emails, and people are giving you their names and their contact, and you're sending them pictures, and it was fantastic.
Speaking of books, so I hadn't seen you in 1,000 years, and then I don't know how we got together, but then I saw your mushroom pictures, and,
Right.
and you had published a glorious mushroom book, and I bought 10 prints, 6 of them in my second bedroom. The other ones are stored away. The book, the Burning Man book, and the glorious mushroom book were you tapped into your literary background, your chops, so the narrative is great and they're interesting. But that then you tried your hand at some serious literature. I'm in about a third of the way through Bright Lights and Bensonhurst.
I didn't know you were reading that.
Yeah, I'm reading it. It's fun. So, I was curious to know, now that you tell me you're from Brooklyn, I want to know what your association with Dems and those guys was. I went to New Utrecht. That was my high school. So
Well, guess what? My mother went there too.
she's probably in my class, but because I went there for about 35 years. Actually, I went to Brooklyn Tech,
Okay.
and then I found out you had to do homework.
Oh boy.
Homework, parochial school kids do homework. Other school kids don't do homework, so they did. Yeah. So, did you have ties to Bensonhurst? Family in Bensonhurst? Or?
When I was 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, they were still kids. My mother had me when she was 18. So they wanted me out of the house. So I would go to Bensonhurst and I would learn what there was in Bensonhurst, and that's where the book came from. But I went to a mushroom dinner one just before Christmas in Brighton Beach, and I had 2 people, my current wife and 2 people in the car. One was a doctor and one was a writer. And I said, I got to stop and show you the lights of Bensonhurst. And, because what it's like. It's in, they have they go over the top with these Christmas decorations. And we stopped, we frolicked, we got back in the car. I drove back to my place in Manhattan, dropped them off. And I was writing a lot of fiction. So I just started writing story. And that was probably about 2003. So I wrote 40 pages, much more noir than what came out later. I started writing that book about, I picked the book up about two years ago, actually, and just wrote it in a year.
I with so much stupid social media and all this stuff, I read in spurts, and when I go to bed and and then I get tired and put it down. So forgive me for not having it finished.
No problem. You need a beach and a foreign country to read a book these days, it seems, even myself.
You know what? I'm like you. I would rather go get the camera and go shoot some pictures. I know that based from the glorious mushroom, there's a new mushroom book in the works, and you're back to your skills as a tabletop photographer, and the pictures are absolutely exquisite. They just blow me away.
I have a studio here up in Woodstock, and I have a beautiful forest. And so now what I did this summer was I'd go out in the morning with my 4A basket. I'd collect my specimens and I'd bring them back to the studio and shoot them.
The
And
original book, you said you go places where Lewis and Clark wouldn't go. Were you using a view camera for those?
for these new ones,
No, for the other ones, the ones in the forest.
when I slithered around on my belly in the forest, I was using a Hasselblad
It's a two and a quarter.
medium format. Yep.
Yeah.
But very, very high end medium format. And with these, I'm using a really high end digital camera. It's a Fujifilm camera. It's not too big, but it gives you basically the same quality as
The advances in
right.
photography technology, amazing. I mean, just, there's so much information in those images that you could jump in them, yeah.
And I have a technique that I use called photo stacking, where you shoot multiple exposures at different focal planes, and then Photoshop has a program where you can combine them. So you can basically see things that your eye can't see.
So do you do that? Does the camera do that automatically, or?
No, it's a very complicated and long process.
You got to do it.
I do it, and sometimes it takes as much as an hour just to see one of the images that I shoot. It's really crazy.
Big images, huh?
Yeah, really big. And then I did something else with this season with this book. I bought these very high-end front surface mirrors, and I made a set, and I was able to, I cut the mushroom heads in half so that you could see the gills as a triptych. So you see the front of the mushroom, but then you can also see the gills on two different sides. So you get almost a three-dimensional view of the mushroom. No one's ever done that. So I'm really excited.
Those pictures were, first I thought it was three mushrooms in it, and I'm kind of, oh, wow, I see. But they're beautiful.
Thank you.
And the, just the staging of those shots are
Thank you.
very elegant and really beautiful. So, in your website is Frank Spinelli Photography.com. Yeah. Kind of all I have now. Thank you for now. I mean, there's so much. I'm sure there's so much more, but thank you so much. I told you off camera, one of the things that strikes me about you is your bottomless curiosity. And I think making of art is, there's no destination, it's just a journey. And stripping away of the onion and getting closer and closer to your own reality, and you'll never be completely honest. We can't, we got too much baggage, but we try, and we make an effort, and I applaud you for that effort, and I thank you so much for letting us into the soul of Frank Spinelli.
My pleasure. Thank you, Allan.
I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. To learn more, check out www.frankspinelliphotography.com and buy Frank's books on Amazon. Also, enjoy some of the other interviews on Allan Gorman's 15 Minutes of Fame Art TV show.
My 15 minutes of fame, I want it, my 15 minutes of fame, I want it.